So this is the case of a 18-year-old engineering student who presented with an eating disorder called anorexia nervosa. Anorexia is basically an eating disorder where there is an extreme irrational fear of putting on weight, so much so that the person almost stops consuming food and they begin to lose weight. It impacts their health, metabolism, etc. Yet when they see themselves perhaps in a mirror, they view themselves as being overweight. So there are two types of eating disorders most typically seen. One is anorexia nervosa, which I just now told you is about not eating. The other one is bulimia, where the person eats and continues to eat, something like binge eating, and then is so consumed by the guilt of having eaten that much that they induce purging or vomiting. So both of these are fairly common. There are many times we might be knowing someone who could be having an eating disorder, but we may not be aware of it. There is not much awareness on this issue. Primarily, both of these are stemming from a desperate need to control life or control what's happening around the person, and in their inability to do so, they end up trying to control the only thing they can control, which is their body weight. So primarily anorexia nervosa is about trying to get a sense of control. What typically happens in, say for example, anorexia nervosa is the person could have had a series of events, sometimes even traumatic event in the past, which has made them feel completely helpless and powerless over what was happening in their life around them and how it was impacting them, and they were helpless to do anything about it. They felt totally out of control, powerless to stop what was happening to them. It leaves them feeling vulnerable, afraid, and yes, at the end of it, helpless. So when that continues as a pattern over a period of time, and when there is insufficient support, it can lead to a place where they feel so vulnerable, helpless, that the only thing they can control is what's happening within, because they can't control what's happening outside or the without. There are many times where this person begins to feel bloated, overweight, feel that they look ugly, and they start cutting down on their food intake in an attempt to shed weight, because that is the only thing they feel they can control. And in that process, it impacts their health, their sleep cycle, from everything from their heart rate, their metabolism. It reaches a point where they lose so much weight that at one point they begin to burn muscle because there's no more fat left to burn. It can lower their blood pressure. It can even become fatal if there is no medical intervention. Binge eating, on the other hand, leads to weight gain. The weight gain makes the person feel guilty. The guilt in turn could make them want to purge. They many times induce vomiting, self-induced vomiting, in order to purge themselves of what they've consumed. Purging can happen both with anorexia nervosa as well as bulimia. And there's guilt in both of the conditions. And the obesity, which could very well become a follow-up of the binge eating, can make them feel depressed, low self-esteem and guilt, and again this too can spike anxiety. Typical symptoms would be depression and anxiety, which most of the time people around are slow to pick up, but the person may, if they are aware, may be able to pick up signs of depression and anxiety. Anxiety at the thought of consuming food in front of others. Binge eating is something that would happen in bulimia, and in almost all the time in both of the cases, there would be the purging and the self-induced vomiting. That is pretty much a sure shot sign of an eating disorder. So both of these conditions would need a multi-pronged approach to deal with it. There would be necessity to treat through a psychiatrist to address the depression and anxiety, a nutritionist to help them get a balanced diet intake to make sure nutritional needs are met. There would also be the need for a therapist to work alongside the nutritionist and the psychiatrist. It's a long way back to normalcy, but it is something that is possible.